Welcome to The Power of One. My name is Brian Beery and I'm your host. This is a program that demonstrates that one person can make a difference. And today we're very fortunate to have Lois Brunet in the studio with us. Community activist, organizer, environmental protection is all what she's about. She's also the former executive director of the Pasadena Audubon Society. Welcome, Lois. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Brian.
Great. So what I wanted to start off with is just this whole notion of how did you come to Pasadena? How did you get connected with Pasadena Audubon? And what was kind of that connecting process? What was that all about?
Well, I was living in Boston prior to being in Pasadena, and about 10 years ago, my husband got a wonderful job out here in Southern California. And so we left all that behind, and I sort of felt that I had changed jobs and done a lot of different things in my life up until that point, and maybe it was time for me to pre-retire at 55. And so I did, but then I got bored. And being bored, I, of course, started to volunteer with organizations that were meaningful to me, and I was just getting into birding and pretty passionate about it. So I went to a lot of Pasadena Audubon events, and then I started doing outreach with them, and very quickly they invited me to join the board. I ran the newsletter for a while, and I realized around that time that I would rather be working. I still had a lot to give, a lot of energy, and I like to work. So the staff person, there was one part-time staff person at that point in time who left, and the space being open, I said, oh, I'd like to try it. I'd like to be it was programs manager at the time. And then over the period of the following 6 years, things really grew. So.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's kind of like you follow your passion, and then people see how talented you are, and then they offer you a job, and next thing you know, you're working full time. I know that we're going to talk about birding today, and we're going to talk about your passion for birds. But just to sort of prepare the groundwork for that, I know you're also interested overall in environmentalism and local issues related to the environment. One little problem I have, living in either a townhome or a condo sort of a scenario, you have a homeowners association, and then you also, here in Pasadena, you have a different hauler for your trash and your recycling and your compost than the city of Pasadena. It's a private hauler. So I know you also live in a community like that, of condominiums. What happened? I know you wanted to try to diversify the trash stream with your HOA. What was the issue, and how did you solve it?
Well, I moved from a private house in Boston where I had been composting for a long time, and before that we were in France for 20 years, and I was composting there as well. My mom was
in
big.
your own yard, right?
In my own yard,
yeah.
And I always got a lot of satisfaction out of that. I cook a lot, and there's a lot of kitchen scraps, and the idea that these kitchen scraps would then be put in a plastic bag and hauled out, it just doesn't make sense to me. I love the idea that what's left over after I eat is going to feed the earth in a very basic way. And so that was not possible in the condo here in Pasadena, but I really wanted to have it. So I got in touch, I first of all found allies within the HOA, and there were two other passionate women that said, yes, let's do this, we can make this happen. And we went and met with LA Compost. We met with the head of LA Compost, actually, Michael Martinez, who really brought community composting to LA. He's a really very impressive person. And so we said that we're a big enough community to have a 3-bin system in our basement, in a corner where it's not going to bother anybody. It's actually not quite the basement.
So you have an underground parking garage.
We have an underground parking garage which is surrounded by what we call the moat, which is on bare ground. So we were able to put the 3-bin composting system on bare ground, and then train the community, collect the leaves out of our gardens, and do our layering and turn it over.
And what about, LA Compost is the service provider, right? And did they build the bins?
They're not actually, I wouldn't call them a service provider. That's what they did. They built the bins, they sold us the system. For 1 year, they had someone that would come once a month and help us turn it. And then after a year, we said, we got this, we can do this on our own. So we're independent, and then the compost that is produced, sometimes it's used in our gardens, sometimes the neighbors use it, sometimes we use it ourselves in our potted plants. it's available. And by the way, if you need some compost, let me know.
I could use a little bit for my garden. Yeah, my condominium complex, or it's a townhome complex, we have plenty of ground where we could, one, place the bin, but then also two, where we can use the compost later on. So I'm just wondering what the response has been within the community of the other neighbors, and are they contributing? Do you take like your banana peels and drop them off in there?
That's exactly what it's for, yeah. So I would say about 25% of the families contribute their kitchen scraps. Not all of them contribute to the turning of the compost, because there's a process there. You have to get out the pitchfork, and you have to get out the hose, and you have to keep it wet. When it rains, I open everything up so that it gets a good soaking. I actually love to do that, and so does my husband, who's an electrical engineer. He loves to grab the pitchfork, so it works out. We find the help that we need. We produce the compost. Sometimes there's an abundance of it. I find it very satisfying, and that we put that thing in place before California had mandated that all private homes and now all HOAs must compost. That's only been in place, I believe. It's going into place right now for HOAs. Mm-hmm. But they're going to be sending out trucks, and they're going to be hauling it to an industrial composting site. And so it's not as direct. My kitchen scraps are making compost on site. It's going to the ground where I live. And so we hope that our system will continue, because what the city is offering is good, and I'm glad that it's required now of all residents. But ours is a more, I don't know, it connects us to the earth in a way that is valuable.
Well, it also keeps the cycle on site. You're not using carbon, or you're not using some other type of energy to move it to another site and then redistribute it. It's used locally.
Exactly.
And I think that's what our homeowners association needs to be contemplating as well, especially because of the mandate you were talking about by the state. It's gonna catch up to all of us. It's great, but there's going to be a little bit of an adjustment. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's a terrific story. Thanks for sharing it. Let's shift over to birds. Why are you so passionate about them, and because like some people in their lives, there's a seminal moment, you go to Niagara Falls, or you go to, maybe the Grand Canyon, and then something changes in your psyche that says, I want to be really connected to nature in this way. So was there one of those moments for you?
In the birding world, we talk about your spark bird, which is the bird that you see and you finally realize, oh my God, there are things that are that beautiful that are around me, that have always been around me, and I didn't notice it. How is this possible? And I want to know more, and I want to learn more. So I definitely had a spark bird, and it was back east in Boston, and it was the wood thrush. And the wood thrushes in general are really great at singing, just have absolutely gorgeous songs. And the wood thrush, I think, is the master. And it sounds like a flute. You could absolutely write the music that the wood thrush sings. And my husband is in acoustics. And so when we heard that bird singing, we were wandering in the woods outside Cambridge, Massachusetts, and we heard the bird sing on a branch. He taped it on his phone. He recorded it on his phone. And I sent the recording to a friend of mine who I knew was a birder. And she shot back within, seconds, that's a wood thrush. And I just thought, wow, that is really, that is powerful, that's cool. I want some of that, I want some of that expertise, and I want to know more. So that was powerful. It was related more to the sound than to the beauty of the bird. A lot of people, it's more the beauty of the bird that comes first, but...
Right, when you say beauty of the bird, the external physical appearance of the bird, right?
Yeah, because birds are so beautiful,
yeah,
and that's
colorful.
Definitely part of the attraction. But I grew up in the woods, north of Manhattan, and there was a stream that ran through the woods behind my parents' house, and I spent a lot of time in the woods. And then I went off and lived in the city for 30 years. Yeah. I was in the big city of Paris, and I loved it. I loved everything about being a city girl, and then we came to Boston, and Boston was also a really exciting city, and I didn't know what I was missing. And it really wasn't until we became empty nesters. We raised 4 kids. We became empty nesters. It was like there was more time, and we figured we'd been to enough cafes and restaurants for several lifetimes. Let's go in the woods, and we started walking in the woods, and it snowballed from there. It fed me in such a deep way.
So this is actually an interesting kind of bridge in the sense that, you know, Pasadena Audubon is in an urban area. And so you and I have had conversations about urban wildlife as well. So yes, we can all go out to the woods. We can go up to the Angeles National Forest and walk around there, or even in the Arroyo Seco. But what types of opportunities are there for people just to be in their backyards in an urban environment, or even in, you know, a city center, to be observing, because birds are everywhere.
Yeah, they are.
To be observing birds and then contemplating their kind of role in our ecosystem.
Well, like you say, birds are everywhere, and you know, we have a great diversity of birds in Southern California. It's actually really an amazing place in terms of bird life. I live not far from this studio, which is in central Pasadena, and if I would do a 2-mile loop from my house, I can see 25 or 30 species of birds on my morning walk. It's a birdie place, as we like to say. So and that's due to a number of things. It's really the climate that we have down here, which is really, and then we have a lot of trees in this city. We're a very green city for an urban area. But I think that anywhere that you decide that you want to look for birds, and I travel a lot, and every time I travel I bring my binoculars, and sometimes it's that first step off the plane on the tarmac and you look up, and I remember seeing an ani in Lima, Peru for the first time at the airport, and that's a life bird. We count birds by life bird. Is it the first time you're seeing it in your life? And it goes on your life list. So you know, every bird you see when you travel is often new and exciting.
So you keep track of all the birds that you see, so that you have some sort of compendium of knowledge of, you know, I've seen.
Absolutely, detailed compendium.
Do all birders do that?
All birders do that I know. Or I won't say all birders do that, but many birders do put their lists from when they walk onto eBird, which is a platform that's run by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and it's a citizen science platform. So all this information is being collected. Many people are familiar with iNaturalist, but if you're not a birder, you may not know of eBird. eBird is the equivalent to iNaturalist, and I can go back and I can see where was the first time that I saw this particular species, and where have I seen it around the world, and how many times, you know, have I seen it? Is it present in the summer, in the winter, in this area, you know? And then I can pull up, they have all kinds of tools in there, like I'm going to this place, what are the birds that I can expect to see? Or I'm here at home, what are the birds that I should consider my target species that are possible for me to see in LA County that I still haven't seen, and what is the possibility? And then it'll give it to you with 5 points after the decimal, 1.03278% of likelihood to see this varied thrush is my nemesis bird right now. That, you know,
I was going to say, you've been in, you know, the LA area or Pasadena for 10 years now, right? So there are some birds, there are some species that live here that you haven't seen yet?
I would say that my nemesis bird is well, yes, I'm thinking of the American dipper, which I haven't seen in LA County. I've seen it in other places. There are very, very few American dipper in LA County. It's a songbird that goes underwater, that eats invertebrates from under the flowing stream. It has to be in a flowing stream. So there are really very few right now, during these 10 years. Varied thrush is another one that's here occasionally. They have eruptive years, so they're much more common up the coast, but they have years when there's more of them present here. I wasn't paying attention during the last eruptive year, so now it's kind of luck, the luck of the draw. Am I going to find a varied thrush before I go? I've actually.
So I want to talk about the health of birds and bird ecosystems, and so part of that is around trees, and so what could we be doing a little bit better, especially in Pasadena? Pasadena, by the way, is very fortunate because, and Altadena and Sierra Madre, this whole region, because we do have quite a few trees. Pasadena manages anywhere, I think it's around 60,000, 65,000 trees in public spaces. So that's street trees and parks. So it's tree abundant. But how do trees and birds, I mean, obviously birds live in trees, but what is the correlation between certain species of tree and birds?
So that's a big question and a very good question. And when you think of how birds are doing, first of all, birds are not doing well. In North America, we've lost 1 in 4 birds since 1970. So that's in the course of my lifetime. And if you think of that as a trend, you know, it's terrifying. 1 in 4 birds is missing.
And real quick, what is maybe not the main cause, but what is a significant cause of that loss of birds?
Habitat loss. It's really habitat loss. And pesticide use, pollution in the environment, these are the things. Climate change is going to become a bigger and bigger issue for the birds because they have to adapt to a changing environment. So, but habitat loss is really, really a big one. And so when we think about the plants that are planted around us in our urban environment, it's really good if we can think about them as habitat, because they are. And for birds, their habitat, like you say, birds need to be in trees to perch, they need to eat throughout the year. But during nesting season, which is just starting right now, during nesting season, the birds are going to need to feed their young, and they like to feed their young caterpillars. It's the food of choice. And it's those tiny little caterpillars that sometimes you can't even see that are in the trunks of the trees and around that are vital. And to give an example, a chickadee will feed their nest of young, a chickadee will feed their clutch 400 caterpillars a day.
400?
It's absolutely astounding the amount of caterpillars that you need to keep a small clutch of birds alive. And so we need caterpillars, we want our birds. The link is going to be the plants. Caterpillars are coming from insects, and these insects are going to lay their eggs, and therefore their caterpillars are going to be born on the plants that those insects can digest. We know the link between milkweed and monarch butterflies. That's true throughout the insect world. And so it's really important to have our native plants here if we want to have strong, thriving populations of our native insects for our birds to survive on, for our nesting birds to survive on. And that's where we've really gone a little bit astray.
Well, certainly, because, you know, Pasadena's history, but then also greater Los Angeles, is immigration from other places, and in particular the East Coast. So then folks coming and bringing ornamentals, I guess is what they're called, that's probably complicated the ecosystem a little bit with both plants that are ornamentals, but then also trees that are. How might we try to shift back to a more native plant-like life-oriented community?
I think it's really a question of awareness. You know, I think it's in some ways it's a cultural shift that's needed. And I think that the reason why we have all these ornamentals is really for cultural reasons. Like you say, people come and they want to bring things that are familiar, but also it's a sign of wealth and sophistication to say that we have, you know, I have these exotic plants, or I have peacocks in my garden, I'm that wealthy. I mean, that's how the peacocks got to the Los Angeles Arboretum. It's a sign of wealth and of sophistication to have things from other parts of the world. And so bringing in the jacarandas and bringing in the ginkgos and things like that is a way of showing that we're a sophisticated community, that we have this great diversity of plants in our urban forest. And in fact, while we do that, we're impacting the biodiversity that we're able to support thanks to this urban forest. So I think that the cultural shift is really the most important thing for people to start to recognize that for what it is. We've been doing this. It's a 20th century phenomenon. We've been really.
Maybe even a 19th century phenomenon.
I agree. It's got its roots prior to that, but it was really, that's all we could think of in the 20th century. And now it's time to recognize that we have a biodiversity crisis. The best way to address the biodiversity crisis is to look at the natives and to support the natives and to come back to the natives. So it's not just, I think that California sagebrush or Cleveland sage or monkey flower are pretty, the way we mostly look at plants, but actually if I put them in my garden, I'm gonna have more birds. And I know so many anecdotal stories about people switching over and planting all natives, and all of a sudden they have 5 species of nesting birds in their yards in our area. You know, it works.
Yeah, and what you're talking about reminds me of, you know, the prioritization, or just absolutely, it's this cultural narrative of, you know, previously these ornamentals, these exotics were really, really important and valuable. So it's shifting that, and I think a lot of the transformation that you see in front yards around Pasadena of, you know, pulling out the lawn, pulling out the exotics, and then planting natives. I think a lot of that is happening, but it is going to require a change in the narrative, and the narrative should be, in order to have a vibrant ecosystem, we need to be uplifting or lifting up the native plants as opposed to these exotics.
Exactly.
So let's shift just a little bit, but talking about diversity, but in a little bit different context, but diversity of birding. A few years ago, and you're from New York, so this story probably is very well known to you. But there was a birder, an African American birder in Central Park, Christian Cooper, and he was birding, and he asked a pet owner, a dog owner, to keep the dog, you know, away from the birds, essentially. And that blew up. That was a huge issue on social media and then in the news. So I'm curious, from your vantage point, how did that incident affect birding overall, raising the visibility of birding, and then also affect diversity of birders, and then who is birding, and because birding should be open to everyone. How was that received in the birding community?
It was just such a terrible incident that highlighted the fact that racist responses are something that African American people have to face all the time, even when they're doing something as innocuous as birding. And the story is actually that Christian Cooper asked this woman to leash her dog. Her dog was not on a leash in a part of Central Park, which is supposed to be wild, and since it's wild, there are a lot of great birds to be seen there. So he was absolutely in the right, and her response was terrible. She told him she'd call the cops on him.
Right.
And why'd she say that? She said, "I've got an African American man threatening me." I mean, it was just atrocious, and it was soon after the George Floyd incident and protest, and I think awareness of what African American people are up against. So, it was like, we know that we have a diversity problem in the birding world. Birding as it's done in the Audubon Society, has traditionally been a sort of a white, or the community that has been attracted to birding. I have a hard time phrasing this.
Yeah.
Has tended to be white and sort of wealthy and educated.
And more affluent.
More affluent. Yes, absolutely. And we have known, and we've been working on diversifying, because we firmly believe that everybody has to be involved in the environment and love the environment to want to protect it. And I'll give you an example of one of the things that we've done within the time that I've been at Pasadena Audubon is our public elementary school project. We were not in the elementary schools, and I couldn't believe it when I came on board that we had no elementary school program, and so we started one which we call the Bird Science Program, and we target Title I schools. We're in Pasadena now. We'd like to expand beyond Pasadena, but the idea is, let's get these kids out, and let's give these kids their spark bird. Let's share our love. Let's really get them excited about nature, so that maybe some will grow up to be ornithologists, I know, but not all. Yeah. But if those that don't grow up to be ornithologists can be strongly enough committed to the birds to want to vote for people who have an environmental agenda, then we've done something. We've done something for our country.
So talk a little bit more about how that shaped up. So I think you have a garden at Washington, or it's Washington Elementary, right?
We're in three different schools right now,
Okay.
but yes, the garden, the native plant garden, we did a pretty big native plant garden. It's 50 by 150 feet in this Title I elementary school in Northwest Pasadena. And we have a garden educator there, so that the students are in the garden very regularly studying what's in there. We've had 5 species of nesting birds and maybe more this year. We've been on the tour, the Theodore Payne tour, but it's just a great place to be. There's
and they're studying birds, but they're also studying the the flora and fauna, I mean the plants there as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's such a great place to study them. They collect the seeds, for example, of the poppies, and you see the change of what the bud looks like, what the flower looks like, how the seed pod forms, how the seed pods open. Seed pods open in all kinds of different ways. We have a whole bunch of lupins that come up, that will be coming up, and lupins are so cool because once they're pollinated by the bee, the flower changes color. And so the pollinators can see which of the flowers that still have pollen and which, or which still have nectar, and not waste any time on the other ones. I mean, there's so much interesting stuff that's going on in that garden. And yes, we look at everything because it's all connected.
Yeah.
I think when you for me, becoming a birder, you kind of dive in from that angle into the natural world, and then you pull a thread, and then it's like, oh, well, birds have their preferred trees. Which trees are these? And I want to learn the names of these trees so I can communicate to people. I can't just say it's over in that green tree. That's a coast live oak and that's a sycamore, and there's a really big difference, and all the rest. And then the insects become very interesting, and understanding a little bit about the geology. I think you pull that thread, everything starts coming, and it's really a love of the natural world. That's why we have a garden educator. We don't have a bird educator at that school, and she's really teaching them. It's the whole ball of wax.
Yeah, unfortunately, I would love to continue this conversation, but we're running to the end of our time together. So I wanted to kind of pull that thread a little bit more and say, for anyone who's watching this program, what could they be doing, especially here locally, as far as, so what are some of the plants and then trees they could be planting in their yards that would help the ecosystem and support local birds?
If they have space, they should plant a coast live oak. The coast live oak is our cornerstone species here. It hosts hundreds of different species of insects. It's also a great place to birds sitting down, because there's always birds in a coast live oak. So I would say if you can plant a coast live oak, that's great. But if you can plant any of our native trees, that's really valuable. And in terms of other native plants, the sages are really wonderful, and there's many, many different kinds of sages. The wildflowers are wonderful to put in. Hummingbird sage is a wonderful plant. It's so fragrant. You can just rub the leaves, and we always invite the kids, give it a plant handshake. Rub the leaves and smell your fingers, and it's just really citrusy and fragrant and tall. My bottom line recommendation would be go to Theodore Payne, our local nursery, or Hahamunga Native Plant Nursery, and get some advice based on your space and where the light is coming into your space and so forth. But any natives that you put in your garden are going to help bring in the birds and help support the birds and all of the creatures that live here with us.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been extraordinary listening to your stories about birding and native plants. So we wish you the best in the next phase of your career, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us and wisdom.
Thank you, Brian, for having me. It was really delightful to chat with you.